Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the coronavirus update. All participant lines are in a listen-only mode throughout the duration of this conference. As a reminder, today's call is being recorded. I'll now turn you over to Senator Glazer. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Senator Steve Glazer. I thank you for taking the time in your day to participate in this telephone town hall. I know that this phone call catches everybody in very difficult circumstances. There are many people who are out of work, people who have businesses that are closed. There are many of you who have kids at home trying to figure out the remote learning. And in some cases, kids at home mean they're not getting a meal at school, so that's another extra burden. And of course, all of that is combined with all of our worry about this virus, its insidious qualities, and how it's affecting our friends, our neighbors, our community, our state, our country. And so it is a challenging time. And I'll tell you that of all the things you hear, the key one remains that physical distancing is absolutely critical to what we refer to as bending the curve and stopping that peak capacity on our healthcare systems when they don't have enough beds, enough intensive care units, enough ventilators, and the rest. That we have to keep this physical distancing as hard as it has been if we're going to stop our hospitals from being overwhelmed. And if you listen to the Governor Newsom yesterday, you heard that while we are making progress, that curve is not bending enough, and we see peak capacity hitting our healthcare system in early May. And so we have to keep doing what we're doing as hard and as uncomfortable as it has been. This town hall today is our 9th. For those of you who have been reading the emails or participating previously, we've done them on small business. We've done it on having our health officers from our county. We did one on pets and how you handle pets with this coronavirus. We did one on coping skills and how you can handle the stresses. All those town halls are taped, and they're on my Senate website, so you can go back and listen to one if you missed one, and hopefully get some good advice or some tips. In terms of the new news that has taken place since the last call, May 3rd is the new shelter-in-place, stay-at-home order by the county of Contra Costa and Alameda County. So that's their best crystal ball going forward, is that we're going to have to be where we are right now until that time. The governor today indicated that if you do have to go out for essential purposes, and we're going to talk about a couple of those right now in terms of groceries and getting to the pharmacy if you need that, the advice is that you have some sort of face covering on. It is not a mandate. Now, it could become a mandate by the county, but the state, it's a suggestion that the governor and his folks at the Department of Health are now advising. They would like you to avoid using those N95 masks if you have any other alternative to that. The reason being that those N95 masks are the most protection at the highest level. They're in short supply. We're trying to get as many of those as we can to our healthcare systems, the nurses, the doctors, and everyone else. So if you have some N95 masks to donate, please do that. If you do go out, you're encouraged to have a face covering. And those of you who have a business or a small business, the governor did announce some new small business assistance today from the state, deferral of sales taxes for up to a year, basically creating a bridge loan for our small businesses. That is on top of some very significant grant and loan programs the federal government has passed and is actually beginning tomorrow. If you have a small business and you potentially could use a loan or a grant to cover payroll and other things, that there are programs that are starting as soon as tomorrow, and some of those are based on getting in line first. So if that's in your something you're affected by, take a look at that. So for the town hall today is on an issue that we talked about 2 weeks ago, and that's about our grocery stores, our pharmacies, the supply chain. We brought it back because there have been so many concerns and issues that many of you have raised with me. We do know that stores have taken new steps to protect the health and safety of their customers and employees. This came up in our call 2 weeks ago, and it was great to see that happen. They've created special hours for seniors and other medically vulnerable people. They're beefing up their delivery services. They've tried to address the shortages that have appeared in high-demand goods. But we're still hearing from constituents who are struggling with all those issues. Everything shortages in everything from paper goods to chicken, garlic, yeast, long waits for deliveries, in some cases over a weekend, in some cases, as I've been seeing the letters that people have submitted for our call today, that they can't even get on a delivery schedule, even 7 days out. There's concerns about lack of physical distancing inside the stores. There's concern about the employees and the employee health and the close contact between employees and customers. So we've gotten already 150 questions in for our guests today. You can still send questions in. Many of those are repeats, so you may hear something on this call where you have a follow-up question. You should send them that question right away into me at the email address that was in the announcement. So with that, we have 3 guests that have joined us. Let me introduce them to you so you know who is here. Brad Street is the president of Safeway, the Northern California division. Brad, you've had seemingly every job in the grocery business, director of a store, district manager, VP of operations, and you were promoted to the division president in 2017. Brad, welcome to our call today.
Thank you.
We know that Safeway, and you're joined by Kevin Lovell, who's your operations VP. Kevin, I know you're there. Thank you both for being here on this call. Safeway has 60 stores in Alameda and Contra Costa counties, including Pack and Save and Andronicos. So it's a big footprint here in our community, and I know there's lots of questions that, Brad, we look forward to your helpful insight on. In addition, we have Stephan Vanwyk, the division vice president for Rite-Aid. Stephan was on our call 2 weeks ago, and he's a glutton for punishment, and so he's come back to help answer more questions. Stephan, thank you for being on the call as well.
Thank you, Senator.
And we have, over the course of these calls, I work in partnership in the legislature with Assembly members Tim Grayson and Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and they have joined many of these calls, and I'm hoping that they may have an opportunity to come in and ask a few questions in the course of our discussion today. So with that, why don't we start with Brad at Safeway. Can you give us, I know you're kind of living through the same thing we're living through. You live here in Northern California. You have kids. How are you holding up?
Well, first of all, thank you, Senator, for inviting us to the call. I know 2 weeks ago we were a little bit in the heat of the initial phases of some of this and were unable to join. So we're glad we were able to today. Just a quick overview. From where we started to where we are today, and then we'll hopefully be able to answer the questions that come up today. But this really, for us, we started this. Our division represents about 283 stores across Northern California, Reno, and Hawaii. And we really started seeing the early impacts in this in Hawaii when Japan closed their schools. We started to see some spikes in business and some concern over there. And then once the first case hit up in Seattle, it quickly started coming down to Northern California area, we realized very early on that we were going to have a different environment than what we've ever been used to. From the very beginning, we've had a tremendous amount of support from our corporate partners through the Albertsons company to help us through some of the very. I guess what I'll say is that I've been doing this for 37 years. I did start out as a bagger bagging groceries, didn't think this would be a career, and I've never been able to leave because there's one component of this business that I love more than anything else, and it's the people. And for me, that's been one of the most difficult things is either early on when I'd get out into stores, not being able to shake someone's hand, not being able to high five, pat them on the back. Those have been very much challenges, and early on it was much more difficult than now when we understand the extreme importance of that. And so to your point, from working from home today, we all do have to lead by examples. But for our business, we really look at everything that we do based on experiences, mentors, leaders from past and present, to really kind of guide us into the future. And fortunately, and unfortunately, this is unlike anything that we've ever seen. And so we've had a lot of early learnings and a lot of, one thing that we might not agree to right now might change within the hour, and we might have to shift gears within the hour. And so we've had to adapt extremely quickly to all components. Probably, just real quick, from a high level, from a demand perspective, from our supply chains, when this started, and really we saw the major impact when the first shelter-in-place order took place. We saw a huge spike in, for those of you that were in the stores, that's when you really saw the long lines. You saw the empty shelves. You saw the stock up and the panic buying, and our inventory really, our entire supply chain backed itself up all the way to the suppliers. At the peak of this journey, we actually, if you consider our inventory levels at 100%, we actually dipped as low as 65% as a total, and as low as 25% in some key areas. And then, as everybody knows, around paper and some of those components, we actually dropped to the zero inventory mark. The good news is this week, by the end of this week, we'll be back up to about 85 to 90% back in our supply chain system, and we're very confident we'll be above 90 as early as next week. I know there's a few key categories here that are lagging a little bit behind, and whether it's eggs, whether it's paper, whether it's sanitizer, wipes, cleaning, etc. One of the things we've been able to work with our partners and supply partners on is really this idea of consolidating SKUs. So a manufacturer today that might supply 100 items to us in the paper line, what they've done is they've reduced that number in some cases down to as low as 20. And what that allows them to do is not have to change over lines, and it's allowed them to become as efficient as they possibly can with the capacity from their systems. And we're confident that once that process starts getting in place as early as next week, that we'll start seeing some of these categories filling back up fairly quickly. There are some around sanitation and sanitizers where we're making sure that product first goes to our cashiers and employees. But we do see those pipelines filling up here shortly, and we are very confident that we'll get our arms around this as it goes. One key item that I'll call out is early on we saw our trips, which we consider a trip the number of times a customer or the number of customers that come into each of our facilities. We saw those trips skyrocket. And as of the last 10 days, we've actually seen those trips decline tremendously, which means for us, people are buying more at the time when they come in, and it's allowing us to get a little bit more normalized in the store, in the process, and really identify those key times, which is a lot of times in the morning. We're able to shift staffing and really focus on our cleaning operations. So we do see some normalization here, and we think that based on that normalization, we're really going to be able to get our arms around some of these key items that I'm sure will come up today.
Well, good. Brad, I appreciate the big 10,000-foot overview. And I know that every store is different. Their inventory is different. The customer load is different. And so we do have a lot of questions that may be unique to different parts of our county. But can you speak to, there's some very common questions. So you kind of indirectly addressed the issue of toilet paper. It's the one that I get the most questions about, certainly today. And so when you talk about getting the inventory levels up, focusing on some key lines to make those supply chains efficient, is that an example? Toilet paper is that example?
Yeah, toilet paper is probably, early on, items like milk were an issue for us initially, and we do have our own self-man plants where we produce milk, we produce bread, we produce some beverage items. Even in our self-man plants, we reduced the variety down to just one type of gallon of milk. And when we did that, the most efficient item was actually at a higher retail than what our cheaper brand was. So we made the decision at that time to lower that item, even though it's a little higher cost. We made the decision to lower that to that lowest retail, just so we make sure that that we're following all of the state mandates and guidelines around the emergency order. But I do see the challenge is still with paper is there's just an immense pressure first thing in the morning. So even when we do get shipments into our stores in the morning, that product is usually gone fairly quickly. But we do see a point in time here. I wish I could give you a day, but we do see a point in time here where we're going to be able to provide that service throughout the day. The one thing that we have encouraged and we're going to continue to encourage until we get fully in stock is limits. So we will have some pretty strict limits around some of those key sensitive items, and that it includes at our store level. So at our distribution center, as we ship product out, we limit the number of items that a single store can order, so that every store can order equally across the board on those key sensitive items. So in the case where if we get 60 cases of product in, each store would get one case, so that we don't have hoarding even at the store level, because I know they want to, our store directors are the most amazing people that we have. I've always said they're the most important part of our business. The stories that we have coming in today are just incredible. And I know they want to be there for their communities and for their neighbors, as well as their employees. And I know that if we opened it up on some of those key items, that we'd probably end up with the first two stores taking it all, and then nobody would get any. So, but again, I do see us capturing some of this rather quickly.
I want to do a brief follow-up now because I want to get to Rite-Aid for just a second, but I know there's many more questions to come. And we have to acknowledge this virus has thrown everything in our lives upside down, and certainly for you in the grocery business, the same thing, right? Everybody's in the washing machine trying to figure our way out, and so there's been a lot of disruptions and a lot of adjustments, and you talk about normalization, and that's really a good way to describe where we all like to be again in so many ways. By the way, do you change the pricing on your products based on scarcity, or do you feel like your pricing's been consistent? If we look back 30 days ago, would you say the price of a gallon of milk or toilet paper would be the same as it is today?
Absolutely. We've maintained pricing. As soon as those emergency orders come down, we have a pretty strict process. And being in Northern California for as long as they have, we have the same process that happens over in Hawaii frequently during hurricanes, and so we build a pretty strenuous process. The challenge sometimes is you might have a 4-pack of toilet paper that we sell at $2.99 or $3.99, but there might be another 4-pack of toilet paper that's called heavy duty or double roll or triple roll that our normal price is $9.99 on, and that's based on the cost that we get. And what happens in a lot of these cases is we'll sell out of that lower priced item first, and then all we'll have left is that item that costs more and retails more. And I know in some cases, folks, we've had a lot of calls and a lot of questions around that, and we've been monitoring and managing it very, very closely. We have seen some cost increases out there, and we are sticking to the 10% guideline rule. One of the big items that we're getting cost increases, just some of it's because of pressure, is eggs. We are seeing, and again, we're getting ready for Easter, and every year egg cost goes up, but even with the pressure, it is putting a strain on those suppliers. So we are seeing some costs go up, but we're sticking very diligently to the guidelines that are in there in those cases where we do feel like we're starting to sell below cost. All
right, we have more questions on senior hours and sanitation and delivery options, so hang on for just a second. Let's bring Stephan Vanwyk in from Rite-Aid. Stephan, thanks for being back on the call. I know you're a Northern California resident, too, with a couple kids at home, struggling through this personally as well as professionally. But can you give us a 10,000-foot view of Rite-Aid, the pharmacy supply chain, and those general issues? And then I know I have a lot more specific questions from our listeners that I want to ask you about in a moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. And, first and foremost, I just want to, go out there and thank all our frontline associates, our pharmacists, our technicians that go in day in and day out. They're doing a yeoman's job for us, Senator, and really appreciate, their impact they have on the community. So really cool to see putting up their hands, going into our stores and really taking care of, who matters most to them, which is their patients. So I want to thank them on a public forum just to make sure they're they know how much we appreciate that. I'm a pharmacist by trade myself, so my hands are itching to dispense medication right now. But unfortunately, my role requires me to make sure the communication streams flow the way it should. So I wish I could be there with you just as much as I know, Senator, you would like to be there too.
Absolutely.
As supplies to the pharmacy supply chain, we're in actually pretty good shape. We don't foresee any disruption to pharmacy supplies specifically. There's going to be some categories in pharmacy that we might be struggling a little bit on due to some of the direction that's coming out from the CDC and the FDA right now, specifically regarding hydroxychloroquine. We have put some specific measures in place to make sure that we don't have hoarding of those particular drugs and folks prescribing that without necessarily a good cause. Our pharmacists are diligent about that, and we are asking the right questions when we are presented with a prescription like that. So we don't anticipate a major supply shortage for any particular drug, at the moment. So pretty happy about that, and very, very confident that we will be able to see this through. From a retail side, we are facing the same challenges that my colleague from Safeway just mentioned. The same pressures regarding the supply chain, manufacturer allotments when it comes to paper product and hand sanitizer. But I can tell you that it almost feels like we've bent the curve in the retail sector. I can mirror what Brad just said. We have a much lower volume of folks coming into our stores at any given time, which gives us time to replenish our shelves, gives us time to put in the right orders, make sure that our inventory is correct so that we get replenished appropriately. So the last 10 days has been, I think, a boon for us to get our stores back into a normalcy. We anticipate to see another surge probably in the next week or two, but so far we've been able to maintain a pretty robust supply chain, and there's some key categories that we are still struggling to stay in stock. We have a respectable supply chain for that, but not as much as we would obviously like from a demand perspective. So high level, I think we're in pretty good shape. The store teams are, we've been able to maintain our staffing and our store hours for our associates. We are taking care of our associates, by various things. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions regarding that, and I'll be happy to answer that. They're our biggest asset, and without them, we couldn't be doing what we want to do for the community. So, again, I just want to thank them.
Great, Stephan. Thank you. And let me start by asking about delivery service for you and for Safeway. You guys provide delivery service, is that right, at Rite-Aid?
Yeah, so we have delivery service. We don't have a very robust delivery service in the Northern California market, specifically Contra Costa and Alameda. So what we have done is we are actually at the moment working with various vendors that we are trying to just prop up and get a little bit more robust service going. We do offer delivery in every single one of our locations, but we're using a different tactic where we might be utilizing USPS or FedEx to get specifically prescriptions to our associates. For front-end product or retail product, we have Rite-Aid.com, which we utilize. We've got a central warehouse where we ship from. So we sort of focus our delivery specifically for our pharmacy customers, for prescriptions specifically.
So Jeff writes in and says, why haven't the stores hired more drivers or moved other employees to do so? Can you speak to what you're doing to ramp up or are you getting the demand? I know Safeway, I'm going to ask you in a second, I'm sure you guys are, but at Rite-Aid, are you getting the demand for more deliveries as a safer alternative than going in the store?
I think curbside pickup is one of the bigger ones we're seeing right now, Senator. Yes, we have seen an uptick in requests for delivery, which we have been able to maintain with some of those alternative processes that I just mentioned. But we are at the moment working with several vendors, which we anticipate will be coming out probably in the next few weeks. I don't have an exact timeline on that. My corporate partners are working diligently to get me that contract signed. but we have some third-party couriers that we are at the moment lined up that can help us, get this to every store so we can get this done as quickly as possible.
And you do provide curbside, is that right?
We do, yes.
Okay,
yes,
and what's the process to have for someone who wants a curbside pickup at Rite-Aid? What do they have to do to make that happen?
Right, so the first thing that I would say is if your store has a drive-through, that would be obviously our preferred method, coming through the drive-through, getting your prescriptions, and we'll also be able to provide some OTC products through the drive-through window if needed.
OTC is over the counter, right? Retail?
Over the counter, correct. That is correct, yes. So preferably our drive-through. We've got about close to 50% of our stores have a drive-through. I'm not sure about Contra Costa and Alameda County, but we've got quite a few stores that have drive-through, and that will be the preferred method of getting this contactless.
But if you don't have drive-through, Stephan, can you get curbside pickup if there's no drive-through?
Yes. So the way we want to do this is to contact the store, talk to the pharmacist. We'll take the credit card information over the phone, enter it in the PIN pad in the pharmacy, and then we'll come outside with the prescription, place it on your windshield or on the in the trunk of your vehicle. Try to make it as contactless as possible. So yes, we do provide that in each and every one of our stores.
And they do that. You do that online, or you have to call to arrange that?
No, so you're gonna have to call the store for that. So you're gonna have to call the pharmacy specifically for that, so we know you're outside. So we don't have a online version for that.
All right, let's bring Brad from Safeway back into the conversation. Brad, can you talk to us about delivery? How are you doing? There's a lot of frustration out there. I'll mention specific questions in a second, but can you give us your view of your drop-off service and as well as curbside work?
Yeah, I can assure you that we've been feeling some of those same frustrations, and I know that our store teams have been feeling it as well. And I'll go through just quickly a couple things here. One of them is we do offer a third-party delivery system through our pharmacies through Script Dropped. We did take those prescriptions to a free delivery through May 3rd. And we'll extend that as needed, just so that we can make sure that we can protect that process as it goes through. That's available online. You can go on to our Safeway.com and set up for that. Shifting over to our actual e-commerce system, we have three main delivery options available here in our counties here in Safeway. One of them is our home delivery, which we offer home delivery service to about 80% of zip codes in Northern California. We have Doug, which is our drive up and go or curbside, and that's available in select locations. It does. You are able to go on Safeway.com and identify those, and then we have Instacart, which is a third-party provider that is available to shop in all of our locations.
And Instacart is where someone arranges it directly through Instacart, so exactly the items they want, and then they have a personal shopper who goes in and purchases and then delivers. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Curbside, is that online principally?
Yes. And let me just, because I'm sure, let me try to address some of the questions that I'm sure are out there. No different than what we saw on. We've looked at that on this. We've been into this for about 4.5 weeks now, and we looked at this when we saw that spike in our normal in-store business. We saw the same exact spike on our e-commerce and Doug, which is our drive up and go business. And to be honest, our infrastructure was not ready for that. Our infrastructure was not ready for the amount of orders or the amount of selectors or the amount of business that we saw basically overnight. Both from an employee standpoint, from a system standpoint, even from equipment, our handhelds that we use to select product, carts that we use to select it. And in the time since that first spike week, we've had to cancel many orders in that week 2 and week 3, and we've got orders extended out to upwards to 10 days. In the last 5 days, we've made more headway than we've made in the last 10 years in this space. We've been able to we've hired over 3,100 new employees here in Northern California in the last 14 days. This includes about 137 personal shoppers. Right now, we feel like we have about 1,100 openings. We're hiring anywhere from 100 to 200 employees a day. We've worked with our corporate partners to work and create corporate partnerships with most major hotel industries to help try to provide jobs for some of those folks that were either furloughed or laid off. So we've been working extremely fast on trying to get and expand out on both of these options as we go. Part of our challenge to get it expanded to additional stores is the amount of training and what it takes to actually get a store up and running. We're working through how we're going to do that and still keep social distancing and processes in place to make sure that our number one concern and our number one effort here is to keep our employees and customers safe. And in some cases, with the amount of orders that came in, we could not ensure that, so we had to put a stop to it. But I can assure everybody that we are working very fast. We have a lot of support, and you'll start seeing windows opening up very quickly as we continue to get people hired and we continue to get equipment into our stores.
All right. Well, thank you for that overview. Let me get to some of the questions that people have submitted. We've gotten over 150 questions here. We're only going to be able to get to hopefully 20 or 30 of them, but let me give it a try. Bonnie writes in, and she says, what's the standard wait time for deliveries or pickup orders? And what would you tell her today now, given the turbulence of getting this thing geared up, Brad? What would the typical wait time be today?
I think it's going to depend on the store. No different than, you referenced it earlier. We have stores as small as, 18,000 square feet in the division and stores as high as 65,000. It's the same thing for the load on each of these stores for e-commerce and for Drive Up and Go for our DUG program. There's going to be some stores that wait time might be a day, 2 days out, and there might be some stores that it's still 8 to 9. And we're working hard on those stores that are those further out windows, and you'll see those windows continue to decline as we get the staffing and the infrastructure in place. I wish I could give you an exact wait time today, but it's changing daily on us.
I'm trying to find the letter where someone said that I think she suggested that Safeway only allowed for delivery times that went out 7 days and nothing beyond that, and they were all filled. Is that still the practice on your website? Only 7 days? That was
in the peak of. That was basically last week. We had to go to a 7-day out window just to keep the orders that we had in the system in order to get delivered. You'll see those windows continue to vary. So there might be days where it's down to 2 or 3, and there might be days where it's back up to 7. And again, it's just based on what our system.
Okay. All right.
Until we get it up to full speed can allow.
All right. So Bonnie asked the second question, when do you restock? This came up a bunch of times. People coming in the morning, the stuff's not there, in the afternoon, stuff not there, in the evening. What is there a standard restocking time, given the concerns about some of these hard to get products like sanitation and toilet paper?
Well, I hesitate to answer it just because I don't want to create any chaos, but the good news for us in Northern California is that we do get 6 and 7 day deliveries from our distribution center, and we do get full support from all of our DSD partners. Those loads do come in overnight. When it comes to some key sensitive items like eggs, for example, those might get delivered by a DSD supplier, or milk. Those might come in somewhere in the morning or early afternoon. So it varies by store. But for the most part, we get our loads overnight, and we're able to. And I'll just address 2 things here. That's one of the reasons that we made adjustments to our hours. So we took all of our 24-hour stores down to either a 9 o'clock close or a 10 o'clock close. And really what that allowed us to do is be able to abide by social distancing while we're throwing those loads and getting those up. And it also allows us to get a good deep clean throughout the entire store. And that's the other reason that we went with our senior hours from 6 to 9 or from 7 to 9, depending on when each store opens. Most of our stores open at 6. We did that. We've had a lot of questions come in around why we did that so early versus having it around 10 or 11. We typically are best in stock between that 6 and 9 time frame, so we felt like that was the best time to get those seniors or those at risk in. And we also felt like that was going to be the time when we were the most sanitized and the most clean in our stores. We are looking at possibly expanding a third day. Today it's only Tuesday and Thursday, but based on the response that we've had, we are looking, and hopefully we should announce a third day here rather quickly.
Well, that would be great, and we have a number of comments about how we can take care of our seniors and medically vulnerable folks, and there's some worries that they're too crowded, and also some worry that the products that they most need are not there at that time, but you've indicated that you're trying to be responsive to that in the hours that you are selecting. Okay, Mary writes in, she says, is it possible for the manager of each Safeway to record an announcement to be played over the loudspeaker perhaps once an hour, reminding customers about social distancing and other safety precautions? Have you guys have any kind of protocol about announcements in the store to make sure people are aware of that physical distancing requirement?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. In our stores where we have our pre-recorded messages, we do have that playing every hour, that reminder. We'll take that as back on us, and we'll go back and make sure that if we do have stores that those are either not working or not in order, or the volume's down on them, we'll see if we can't do it internally. I think that's a great suggestion.
Great. Thank you for taking that one to heart. She writes in with 1 second question. She says, is it possible to ask each checker, bagger, and shelf loader to wear a mask while at work? You've heard that there's new guidance on wearing some cover over your nose and mouth. Do you have protocol on that, and have you thought about requiring them now, given the new announcements from the State Health Department about having some covering over their face?
Yeah, I will tell you that early on when the virus first hit, we've tried to follow the CDC guidelines as closely as we can. And early on, we were receiving guidance that it was better not to have masks and not to wear gloves because of the fact we couldn't sanitize and keep those clean. With the new guidance, we've opened it up, and we've told all of our employees that if they have masks or if we're able to provide gloves, that they're certainly able, capable, and encouraged to wear them. The challenge is no different for our essential workers in grocery as it is for the medical and providers. It's just getting masks and having them available. We did have available some masks early on that we were able to get to our 170 pharmacy locations. So in the case where they've needed to do some counseling or actually provide shots, they do have those masks. But we are working very closely, and as soon as those are available, we'll make sure that we get them in the stores. We did go out, and 2 things that we think are going to help us here. We did go out and install plexiglass. I know that's only one option. We'd love to have everybody in masks in our cashiers and in certain specific areas. We did go out and put the floor clings on social distancing so that we can highlight. The next step in this process is we're actually going to start putting directional arrows in our store that's going to guide folks to go one way down an aisle and then the other way down the next aisle. We think that'll help prevent some of this passing, but we are taking it very serious, and as soon as we can get some of that equipment. And Senator, just, I wrote down your opening comments about not using the N95 so we can get those to the medical, and we'll see if we can't get some additional type of masks out there for our folks. Thank
you for that. Now, Catherine writes in and says, what about gloves, changing gloves in the deli compartment? What's the store policy on changing gloves in deli?
Our policy in the gloves in deli is we have the tighter fitting gloves back in our full service departments. Same thing with our seafood departments. They're required to wash hands. They're required to either sanitize or wash those gloves after every single order or replace those gloves after every order. If they wash and sanitize those gloves, it's the same as washing and sanitizing their hands. And that's one of the key areas where we've got the supervision that we do have out in our stores, monitoring and managing as diligently as they can.
Tracy writes in and says, do all stores now have plexiglass shields around the checkers? And she also asks about line separations on the ground, which you made reference to. Are plexiglass shields now in all your stores?
Yes.
Okay, and as you said, you are trying to create separation lines on the ground to help people.
Yeah, we have social distancing guidelines, and they're actually templates that we actually sent to all the stores. Originally, we were using tape, and then we actually provided them with some actual stickers that go over the top of that tape. And again, we're learning areas where we, as quickly as we can, during times where we don't have all of our check stands open, we're asking that our stores open every other check stand so that we get that distancing between those. In the morning, we do have a lot of our stores that have full staff. We are going to ask that our customers, we're putting social distancing guidance in place where you'll see a sticker on the floor. We'll ask that the customer behind does not put their items on the belt until the customer in front of them leaves, so that we can keep that social distancing between the two customers. And then we're also working on guidance around our self-checkout lanes, where for those stores that have 3 in a row, we're going to stop using the 2 center ones. We're going to make sure that we've got the 6-foot space in between, and we're working on how we're going to get the personal protective equipment for that Scott lane or our self-checkout attendant to make sure that we're going to be able to support all of the distancing guidelines there. And
Michael writes in regard to employees. He says, what is Safeway doing to safeguard their employees, to acknowledge their contributions as they are on the front lines, along with police, janitors, and nurses in hazardous conditions? And he notes that there are some other retailers who have stepped up and provide greater compensation for their employees during these difficult times. What would you say to Michael?
Well, I agree with Michael. I will tell you that when you hear the word essential and you talk to our employees and the pride that they have about what that means and that they're there for their neighbors and communities, it's amazing. And the letters that we get and the feedback, and we've got customers that are leaving signs on our front doors that say, thank you, Albertsons employees. Our frontline associates are just amazing, and we couldn't do any of this without them. We made the decision as a company 2 weeks ago. We rolled out appreciation pay, so all hourly employees across our entire company received a $2 an hour wage benefit on top of all hours worked. So if they work up to 50 hours that week, they get $100 additional on their paycheck. And we felt early on that we had to do something for those employees because of the environment and the situation that they're in.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that with us. Zelda from Brentwood writes in to say that she got a service. She had made an order of over $300. They had waived the service fee, but when it was delivered, there was a service fee on there. Do you charge a service fee for delivery? What's the general practice there?
Well, the good news is that we have charged the delivery fee for that service. The good news is that as of, I believe, tomorrow, I'm looking at Kevin to make sure that my dates are the same here. So I might be off a little bit here, but we are going to waive those service fees for the immediate future. If there has been a problem, I just encourage you to reach out to our store director in the Brentwood location, and we'll get you taken care of on however we need to. If something slipped through the system, shame on us.
All right, Zelda, you heard that from the big boss.
You can use my name.
I only have 1,400 of my closest friends on here, Brad, so please take care of them. All right, Jacob writes in and says, do you recommend that I use disinfecting wipes or wash every item I purchase from the grocery store, and ask also about from Rite-Aid? And I know that's almost a public health professional observation for Jacob, but do you guys have any opinions about disinfecting or washing items that come back from your stores? Stephan, you want to take that one first from Rite-Aid, and
yeah,
we'll go to Brad.
Senator, I think I'm going to give you my personal opinion here. When I buy something, I do that when I get home. From my retailers, from any other retailer, because at the end of the day, we don't know as much as I think we would like to know about this virus. It's extremely fluid, and guidance changes every single day. And I think just taking a cautious approach approach is going to be the best approach. So, personally, I'm doing it to protect my family when I bring something outside of the home, even something that is delivered to me.
Very good. Brad, you have a different view?
No, I think for us, one of the things that we did early on is we actually stopped all of our full service departments. So for our bulk foods, for our bulk donuts, our roll bins, all of those things, we stopped having those be self-service just because we couldn't guarantee that every time somebody used one of those scoops that we could sanitize that scoop. So we shut down all of those components of our business very quickly. We also have stopped taking returns in most stores just because we can't ensure the quality of that product coming back. In extreme cases, we'll certainly take care of folks, but we want to make sure that we're as cautious as we can be. I would always recommend washing produce and those items when you take them home, but I unfortunately would not be able to give you an expert. We could go back and see if we can't get some information or some guidance on that question. But I again, the same with Stephan. I'd practice as much caution as you can.
Yeah, and I would endorse Stephan's response to personally. I'm not a public health expert, but I'd rather be cautious, and so we do wash everything we bring home from the market, even though we know that they are very careful at all of our markets to be sure that there's no virus on the produce and the product. Okay, very good. Thank you for the feedback on that. Stanley writes in with a similar concern as the woman from Brentwood. He said, I put in an online order on March 16th for toilet paper. It was to be delivered, I was told it would be delivered on March 29th, and that day the delivery came, no toilet paper was charged a shipping and service charge. So Stanley, that's Brad Street, president of Safeway, Northern California. Talk to your local manager there, and I think that they'll try to figure out a way to make sure that you're kept whole on that. But that is a general problem, right, Brad? I mean, again, putting in an order, if the system says they have it and there's a delivery date, people are kind of counting on that. But I guess things can be out of your control too in this circumstance. Is that right?
Boy, I'll tell you, this is one of those where we had all of our product available early on, and I feel terrible about the fact that our customers got on there and had all this product online where, hey, the toilet paper is available, and they selected these orders, and then at the end of the day, we didn't have any of the product on our store shelf to ship it. It was a terrible experience for us to go through, and all I can do is apologize. We are in the process of now, we are cutting our catalogs down and trying to get those catalogs that are online that are viewable to the items that we're actually carrying, and then as more products get online, we'll start increasing those catalogs. Unfortunately, based on the speed that this took place, we just weren't able to do it quick enough, and that happened to a lot of our customers. But again, we'll try to make it we'll make the service fees and those things right for sure. But getting the toilet paper as soon as we get it, we certainly could get folks on the top of the list if they want to contact their store managers.
Great, thank you. And Stanley, I'm sure, appreciates that feedback. Vicki writes in, she says, as a senior citizen, I appreciate early designated shopping hours, but I was distressed to find only one checker waiting on a very long line of early shoppers last week at a Dublin store. Could you please help us move in and out faster by having more lanes open? What would you say to Vicki?
I think Vicki is absolutely right, and based on that comment, we are currently working on. Here's the way I'll answer it. We know now what we've got a trend. So this was the third day that we had that trend take place for those senior days. Today was actually our fourth day, and we've got enough trends and data now that we should be better than that. And so the commitment that we'll make today is that we're going to have the right amount of staffing in those stores on those days.
Very good. And Rose Marie asked a similar senior question. She said, maybe she's not an early morning person. She says, can seniors please get an afternoon time to shop in the store? Maybe noon until 1. So she's suggesting, everybody's got an opinion, right? And I'm sure that's an important view from Rose Marie. But we talked about potentially expanding to a third day for seniors. Any discussion about when that time might be and trying to accommodate people on different schedules? Yeah,
that's been a tough one, and again, the third day that we're looking at expanding would be the same time frames. It would just be a different day. Again, we still feel committed to the time when they're going to have the most availability of product and the time when those stores are going to be the absolute cleanest are going to be that first 2 hours or 3 hours in the morning. So I don't see us adjusting that yet.
Well, that's a pretty compelling argument. So, Rosemarie, we're going to have to get you up a little earlier, but I think cleaner stores and more product. Don't tell anybody. That's the time to shop. Okay. Sheila writes in and says, many people in my neighborhood would advocate for limiting the number of customers allowed in the store at any given time. Have you guys been doing that either at Safeway or at Rite-Aid?
Yes, Senator, I'll take that one.
Okay, Stephan from Rite-Aid.
Yeah, this is Stephan from Rite-Aid. So we have been monitoring. Our store managers have been monitoring social distancing. We actually have a dedicated person in our stores, or most of our stores, that actually remind our customers and our patients regarding social distancing guidelines. We have not necessarily had a hard number on the number of associates because we have quite a few different size stores. We are looking into something like that where we're going to make a calculation based off the square footage, and the number of customers we'll be allowing at the stores. We're actually working on that right now. We definitely don't want to turn anybody away, so we want to make sure everybody gets what they need, specifically as it pertains to the prescriptions that we know that everybody needs. So, not something that we've taken a hard stance on, Senator, and I think it was Rosemarie. I would say that there might be some changes as this thing progresses, but as of right now, we are relying on our store leaders to make the call.
All right. And Brad, Safeway stores, are you doing any limiting of how many can be in the store at one time to protect everybody?
Yeah, we are in certain locations. We have been in certain locations, but as of today, this morning we went through a list and we calculated the social distancing guidelines based on the square footage of each store. You're going to see that rolling out based on certain times and based on certain stores and certain store counts and certain sizes as early as tomorrow.
Terrific. You guys have a few more minutes for some more questions. They're still rolling in here. Hopefully that's an oh yes. Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We're good.
Maria asks about charging for bags. I don't know about Rite-Aid, but Safeway, you have changed your policy. No more reusable bags in, right? They have to get a fresh bag. Are you charging for that?
No, and we've also I was also on a call with Governor Newsom a week back, and we asked about possibility of if we get limited on the number of the current thicker bags that we can use that we normally charge the 10 cents on. We've asked if we get low on supply there, if we might be able to go in a temporary time frame for T-shirt bags, just to make sure that we have bags for our customers. We have not got an answer on that back, but at the point in time where originally we said that we were going to let a customer bring in their returnable bags and bag their own. Since then, we've taken the stance that we're no longer going to accept any customer's returnable bags. We'll bag every order in a new bag, and once we made that decision, we're no longer charging the 10 cents. Okay. Well, Maria, thank you for asking that question. And Stephan at Rite-Aid, how are you guys handling charging for bags?
Yeah, exactly the same, Senator. We don't want our folks to bring reusable bags in. We are not charging for the plastic bags that we gave out, no. Okay. Terrific. A couple other questions. Renee asks about for those products that you have to restock often, what about putting pods near the storage entrance and making it easier to replenish more quickly? That's Renee asking that. Brad, any insight on that? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. One of the things that we have been doing on things, we have been able to get back on track for the most part on our water supply, and on those items we're dropping pallets of that up front as close as we can. As far as the paper and those items go that are those high sensitive items, I do think that at the point where we get enough stock and enough product back in the supply chain, that we would be able to do that. If I understand the question to be,
could we get that product so that they don't have to search for it throughout the store on those high-sensitive items in a high-profile location? I do think that's something that we can look at once we get that back in business.
Okay, terrific. Mary writes in to say she's talking about limiting items rather than just select ones, but she says that some stores promote, she claims, hoarding by offering 10 for $10 type sales. Can we ask stores to stop that? Are you familiar with that, Brad, in terms of that's still a practice you guys are engaged in now?
Yeah, this has been one where we've had to watch closely based on the pricing guidelines that we get once we're in an emergency order. A couple of things that we have done is we do offer promotions each week around must-buys, where if you buy 5, you get a certain discount. We've eliminated as many of those as we can because of that exact question. We are looking at that on a daily, weekly basis. You might still see some of those programs on items that we feel like we can get plenty of stock on, but for the most part, our sensitive items, we're trying to eliminate buy one, get one frees or things that would encourage someone to purchase more than what we're asking them to limit on.
Very good. Faith writes in and says, is it possible to have workers tested and to make sure they come into the work healthy? You know, one of the things, and this is me speaking, not Faith, that one of the insidious parts of this virus is that they say up to 25% of the people who have it have really no symptoms, which means that they're walking around feeling like they're healthy, and that's great, but they are still contagious. And one of the practices to try to determine whether somebody has a virus or not is to take their temperature. And now this is going back to Faith's general question. What are you guys doing, and this is so difficult, but what are you doing to make sure that the employees that are working in your stores are healthy, that she writes in her note that she does see cashiers touching their face and scratching their noses, not wearing gloves. But what are the practices in your store to try to make sure that the workforce is a healthy workforce and not potentially contagious to customers?
Yeah, we've actually approached this in phases, and starting tomorrow here in most of the 60 stores we're talking about here, we'll be in what we call phase 2. And phase 2 is before someone can punch in for work, there's a specific list of questions that they have to answer every day as they come into work, and then if they leave for lunch, they're going to have to answer those when they come back in the building. And that list of questions is the list of questions around the same as the CDC guidance. If they answer no to any of those questions, there's a specific process and protocol that they have to follow as far as a phone call goes. So we are in the process of it ties into what we were talking about limiting in stores and the arrows and directional and some of those things. This is all tying in together on how we are going to ensure that before anybody comes to work, including our vendors, our truck drivers, our refrigeration repair guys, all of those folks will have to go through the same rigor before they're allowed to come in and work.
Great. And Stephan from Rite-Aid, same question.
Yeah, so Faith, I think that's a great question, and thank you for thinking about our associates. Very similar to what Brad said, we have a checklist that our associates go through. In addition, we are in the process of procuring temporal thermometers, infrared thermometers for our associates so we can measure the temperature prior to each scheduled shift. We've got various protocols in place for when an associate does not feel good or is displaying symptoms. We do send them home and we do pay them for the time that they're not working for us. And then we monitor the associates. We have multiple different vendors that actually come into our stores and sanitize our stores on top of what our store associates are doing in a day on a pretty much hourly basis. We have different levels of sanitation. If we have associates that have a confirmed case of COVID, we do go in. We do a huge deep clean that we fog the store. It takes about 4 or 5 hours that we make sure that the store is completely sanitized. In addition, we've also been able to procure masks for our associates. That's currently being shipped. So all our associates will be wearing masks if they choose to in the coming days. And then we also provided every associate on the front line in our company, cashiers, technicians, pharmacists, and even our field leaders with a sanitation kit for their own personal use at their home or at work, as they prefer. So, we're really, like I said in the beginning, very thankful for their commitment, and we want to make sure that we keep them healthy as much as we keep our customers healthy.
Terrific. We have two people who wrote in with great suggestions. One of whom, Brad, you already spoke about. Sandy writes in and asks about one-way aisles so people don't cross paths, and it sounds like something that Safeway is considering doing. And Sandy must have been sending you those vibes. Jeffrey writes in with an idea about, again, sensitive to the crowds and sensitive to seniors, whether or not Safeway considered assigning shopping days based on your name, like they used to do with gasoline lines and license plates in the 70s. Any thought to that, or you think you've been able to manage the crowds without that kind of provision?
Well, I think based on what the most recent 10-day trends have been, now that we're seeing that reduction in the number of times folks are coming to the store, I think at this point we're going to be able to manage it okay. We have talked a lot about different ways that we can get folks in during different times of the day so they don't all pile in at a certain time. And to be honest with you, we're seeing that happen naturally, where we're seeing our hours all change, which has made it a little bit difficult on our scheduling up front here, but we think we're getting a little bit more. I know there's no normal today, but I know we're getting a little bit of normalization based on trends. But I will tell you that I don't think there's an absolute answer to that. And if we feel like there's a point in time where we need to do something like that, it's certainly something we would consider.
Very good. Thank you for staying open-minded on that. Joseph writes in, is the state of California considering an order to ration products of short supply? Well, I guess I have to answer that one. I'm not aware of any such order. It's not been discussed at my level anyway at this point in time. As you know, a lot of the actions that the state has been taking have not been legislative acts. They've been executive acts by the governor. So it's possible he might be considering that. But given what you've heard today about the supply chain being a little off-jigger but getting back close to normalization, I don't know if it's something that is being seriously considered at the moment. Beth writes in, and this is Brad, this is a Safeway question. Is there any way that an employee can take a leave from their jobs until this health threat is over? She says, my son who lives with me works at Safeway as a clerk. She has lung issues, concerned that he'll be exposed to the virus and pass it on to me. If there is an employee who wants to take a leave today, are they able to?
What I would say is that we have very, very good benefit package for our employees, and I truly care about them. As I always talk about our business as we have two families. We have our personal family and we have our work family. And what I would ask, the guidance I would give there is to have that individual contact their store manager and get in contact with one of our HR leads. We have an HR lead for every one of our districts out there, and they'd be able to provide the best guidance there.
Very good. And let's have Kim have the last question of our conversation today, and I'm sorry for those who still have questions that haven't been answered yet. But she talks about healthcare workers, those amazing people in our hospitals and healthcare facilities on the front lines. And she appreciates the work that's been done for seniors with early morning hours a couple days a week. And she raises the issue of what can we do for our healthcare workers who have schedules and families and all the complexities of life that we all have, but are working in some very serious jobs and a lot of limitations there. Any thought to either of you guys about your companies trying to find some way to help our wonderful healthcare workers?
Yeah, Senator, I'll take that one. I think that's a great suggestion. We've been talking about this. Thinking specifically folks that work very long hours. Rite-Aid has. We've kept our operating hours the same. In the most instances, we're open till 9, 10, sometimes 11 o'clock at night. I'll definitely take that one back to my corporate partners and discuss what we can do for these folks, because I completely agree, specifically because we also have frontline healthcare workers in our stores right now, and we feel the pressure that they're under. And I can just imagine how the folks working as first responders and as hospital workers must feel right now.
Thank you for taking that up the food chain. I think that's such a nice thing to do for these wonderful people. Brad at Safeway, any thoughts about what we could do to help our healthcare workers?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of conversation around how and what would be the best to do. One of the challenges that we always have is that sometimes we think we have a great idea as we're sitting around a table of executives, and when we go out into the stores, we realize that reality is a little bit different. So we've been trying to figure out how we're going to best do it, because their hours and their shifts and everything, they work so different that I don't know if there's a one-size-fits-all. But we're certainly looking into it, and we're going to try to figure out how we can help the best we can there.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. I know there's still more questions coming in, some of which I think you have answered. Maybe these folks have joined this conversation in the middle. Let me remind folks that this is a taped call, that it's going to be posted on my webpage within a few hours, and you can go back. And there's been questions about prescription pickups and more questions about seniors and curbside pickup and the rest. And hopefully that they can go back and get some answers by reviewing our conversation from earlier. But they're welcome to continue to send notes in, and we'll do our best to answer them. Brad Street from Safeway, Kevin Lovell from Safeway, thank you very much for being in this conversation. You're such an important market in our community. You've been honest and frank with us today. I know some of the answers are not what people want to hear. They still want to find that toilet paper and that sanitizer, but I know that you're working hard to try to make that happen as well. And it's so good to hear even the conversation about normalization, even in our shopping centers, given all that we're going through. And I want to thank you both for representing Safeway so well in this conversation. And Stephan Vanwyk, you came back a second time. Hopefully we may try to get you back again. And it's really because the issues of drugs, prescription drugs, and retail and grocery, it's so much part of our world now. We're all at home. We're consuming more at home. It's not just electricity and water. It's also about food. You guys couldn't be more important to our world than ever before, given the limits on restaurants and the rest. So for both of you and your companies, I thank you for being a part of this conversation. I thank you for taking back the suggestions that many of the listeners have been providing in their notes. We appreciate all that you're doing and your willingness to talk straight about what's going on, and maybe in a couple weeks we can have you back again and get new updates as to what's going on. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, I want to thank those who have hung in there on this conversation to learn more about what's happening in our supply chain among our markets and pharmacies. As I said at the top of the show, this is a very difficult time, and I know that we're all looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to be a little while longer on that. But we all are trying to find a way to cope in a healthy way, stay safe, and I think that finding the ways to get groceries and pharmaceutical drugs to each of you in a safe way is on the front of your mind. It's on the front of my mind too. I want more delivery options. I think that's the safest way to not expose yourself. I'd love to have more curbside convenience, and these are certain things that I'm going to continue to argue for and ask our wonderful retail partners to continue to invest in. Obviously, for them, everything has gone upside down in their world too, and the new normal is something you wouldn't even have imagined 30 days ago. So they're trying to figure it out, and they're trying to be responsive, and I respect them for that, even though we'd like to see it happen faster and sooner, and to get to that normalization place at a quicker time. But this is a difficult thing that we're going through. We have to keep our communities healthy. That's the way we're going to get through this, is to slow down the virus, stop the hospitalizations and the mortality rates. They're going to be going up for a few more weeks, unfortunately. But we know to bend that curve, our best opportunity is is to protect you and your family and friends. It means to not have you be exposed and to protect everyone in your neighborhood in the same fashion. And that means physical distancing. I know you'd love to have those friends over for dinner, or having a glass of wine out on the patio, or whatever it is. We just have to, we can't do that right now. And that's the hardest thing to say to people and to say to friends. I know it's been 14 plus days now. It's not long enough, friends. It isn't long enough. And we have to stay focused. And if we do this together, we're going to come out of this together. The Bay Area was the first in the country to take the serious stay-at-home message to heart. Our public health directors made that choice. It wasn't a collection of politicians. They said, this is what we need to do to get us healthy and back sooner. And we all can't wait for that to happen. So I appreciate you being a part of this conversation on groceries. We're going to have another town hall on dealing with the unemployed and what we can do to help them. There's a lot of things happening on the state and federal level to help those that have lost their job. Almost 2 million people have lost their job in the last few weeks, and we are looking and working on a lot of different things to help those folks. And so stay tuned to other things. If you have other ideas as to what you want to have talked about within these telephone town halls, send me a note, and we're going to do our best to bring those experts in to share in their insight on those so many issues that are affecting our world today. So with that, I thank you again for your attention and for your time. I hope you have a very nice rest of your day. Good day.